Hello, everybody, and welcome to Office Hours by TraitWare. When security leaders talk about attack surface, it's typically around endpoints, cloud workloads, and APIs. But there's an entire dimension that's multiplying faster than all of those. And most organizations aren't even measuring it. Identity. Human identities, machine identities, third-party identities, orphaned identities. What does that mean for enterprise risk? What has changed isn't just the scale, it's the nature of identity itself. Have we outgrown how we define identity security? Our special guest, as always, Heath Spencer, CEO of TraitWare and Director of Technology, Chris Canfield. Welcome, everybody.
Hey.
Today's show. Heath, what do most people still get wrong about identity security today?
6 years ago, as the pandemic hit and remote work became a predominant thing, it kind of highlighted why identity is so critical to security. Identity's been being used as a gated mechanism since the dawn of man for different environments, but in the digital world, really came about in the 60s at MIT, grew from there as computer use got bigger and bigger. And I don't think people really thought about it identity as this security thing. They just figured everyone has this, username and a password, and they didn't really define it as identity. Historically, we used this old castle mentality of a moat and a firewall and things to keep people out, and you could only come through the door. And it was only as strong as how tall was your castle walls, right? And even since then, going back to medieval times, identity is the way people got across the drawbridge, right? They said, I'm this person, and they had no way of really knowing or authenticating you were really that person. The level of identity has just continuously expanded across all the different verticals or buckets, if you want to use that term, of identity, from human identity to device identity to application identity. And now we have this hybrid machine / application of an AI agent, where we want the AI agent to function, it's running as a machine, but it's also functioning as an application, and we want to give it permissions like a human. And that's what's changed a lot.
Right. Chris,
Yes.
a tricky question for you. If we stopped calling it identity management, what would we call what teams are actually dealing with right now?
Boy, there's a lot of different ways to think of that. But what I've been looking at lately and thinking about is identity health and posture. I don't know if a lot of teams are actually doing it because they don't have necessarily the tools that allow them to do that, or they aren't configured correctly, or just in general identity, what I call identity oversight, which is a more holistic view of what identity is and what they've got going in their identity landscape internally. So identity management maybe is the simplest version. You think of identity management as like, I need someone to get into my system to be able to do something. And that's about it, right? You give them access. Traditionally, you give them a username and a password, and then you create an account for them somewhere. And then you kind of forget about it until they complain about it and they can't get in. And that's usually because they forgot their password, or they had to change it, or whatever. Something happened with their password and they weren't able to get in again. And that's the old way of doing things. That's what identity management was traditionally. But I think what it's evolving to, and where it is really today, or should be today, is more about the identity health and posture. And management is just another part of it. The management is what informs the health and the posture. If you have an identity, but you don't know how healthy it is, or how stale it is, or how relevant it is, then what do you have? You don't really have a good overview of what's going on. We'll get into some of that later, I think. And that's why I use the term oversight. Identity oversight is really seeing everything. Of course you have identity management, but what's actually being managed? How is it being managed? How secure is it? All of those things, I think, are kind of the more important building blocks that are kind of sitting on top of the foundation, which is fundamentally identity management. Does somebody have access to something? Okay, great, they have access, but who has access? When do they have access to? What exactly do they have access to? How do they have access to it? And ultimately, is that secure? Is that configured the right way? And then, of course, we'll get into some of these later, but like, what else is out there that we don't even know about?
Yeah, and I'll just expand because I literally just got off a call with a managed service provider. They're looking at how, they help their customers, right? And a lot of businesses that hire a managed service provider, an MSP, want them to be able to sign into their workstation, whether that's a laptop, a desktop, or whatever it is, and fix a problem. Hey, this isn't working on my computer. And a lot of these companies, these MSPs, then either have to get the credentials from that user and sign in as that user, right? So they're sharing, and so Chris talks about identity management and what it needs to be. It really is about the health or the security posture of that. And this MSP needs to be able to then grant access to multiple different support engineers to all of these different endpoints, right? To have them sign in. And right now, they're sharing folders of passwords and a single point to then go get an OTP to sign into one of 50 different computers, let's say. And so if there's no way to have visibility into who's actually using that identity to sign into that box, and it is a shareable identity, then it can be shared on purpose or by accident. And if we look at recent attacks that have happened, the hackers are not breaking in, they're logging in through these shareable identities.
Chris, do organizations actually understand their identity environment, or just the parts they can see? Can you explain?
I can't speak for every organization, of course, but right. I don't think fundamentally identity was built to give admins the ability to really see what's going on. And again, that's nobody's fault. That's just the way the systems have evolved over the years, because you have all these disparate services. You have a bunch of different accounts for an enterprise, then they're not connected and then they're not talking to each other. So you've got your Microsoft over here or your Google over here, and then you've got all your other services that you want your users to get into. But like I said, you're not really, they were all designed separately. They all have their own logins, their own ways of logging in, different MFA, maybe different MFA options on each of those. So I think because they are separate, if you're not using a tool like TraitWare where you're kind of consolidating all of your identities under one roof, where you can actually see, standardizing the way that they log into the different services using identity standards, then I don't think you're really going to get a good picture of what's going on there. And even if you are doing that, there are still perhaps, and usually, a lot of identities that have slipped through the cracks that are old and stale. Companies might even be paying for licenses for them. Or worse, they are kind of like dormant accounts that could still be hacked because they aren't really falling under the purview of a good security posture system like TraitWare. They might have been set up with a really simple password like years ago, maybe to access a printer or something like that, and they don't really realize, they're not thinking about it anymore. But when you're using a system like TraitWare and we're going passwordless, and you start using our system, those types of little stale accounts, those old accounts, I think maybe we're talking about this later too, those will start to surface. You'll start to see those gaps or those old ways of logging in, or those old legacy accounts, and they'll start to kind of rear their ugly head, which is a good thing. It's actually a good thing. You're actually going to get better insight into your platform by moving to a stronger authentication, a more holistic kind of identity platform.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And we are going to talk about the future that is here right now. We're going to talk more about that. Are we overconfident, to both of you? Are we overconfident because we're measuring endpoints instead of identities? And are people confused?
If we're only looking at how many endpoints, which would mean a person's workstation, their laptop, their desktop, etc., are we actually tracking and putting software on like anti-malware or any of those things to try to keep the computer safe versus tracking identities? And as Chris was saying, is because of disparate systems, a term that's thrown around a lot recently is shadow SaaS, right? Employees went and signed up for a cloud-based web application and said, hey, I need to use this tool, to do my job better, and they signed up using their corporate identity, but the administrator doesn't know, or the HR department doesn't know that they signed up for that service or went and got that tool, or they're using sign in with Google or sign in with Microsoft and just signed in for a tool and have it, but it's not through a centralized identity management tool like TraitWare, like Okta, like Microsoft, like Ping, and they may or may not have enforcement policies that don't let you sign up for other things. And so there's a lot of unknown tools being used. And when there's unknown tools being used, it means that corporate data, right, which is the gold that the attackers are after, could be being stored or used in any one of those unknown tools, right? You might have saved something over there, or inputted data to run a calculation or whatever else it is on some other tool, and you don't know that it exists. Or then you granted that tool an API key to go access something else, right? And so that is identity sprawl, right? That can go into applications that admins may or may not know you have. And I think you were hinting towards what's happening right now, and what's happening in real time at a very fast pace is now not only do you have identity sprawl against SaaS tools, but you now have identity sprawl across AI agents that every employee is trying to figure out how to do their job more efficiently to keep their job, or be the one that's managing AI agents and orchestrating them properly to do their job the best they can so that they keep their job. And those AI agents are being granted access to corporate data to do that job fast, and how in the speed in which those tools are being implemented, those agents are being implemented across different environments, is creating a lot of identity sprawl. And those agents need to have their own identity, right? And yet they have a human that should be in charge of them or telling them what to go do.
Right. And speaking of identity sprawl, Chris, do you have anything more to say about that? Where is it coming from?
We have like the traditional identity sprawl, which is what we've been talking about, which is where people just spin up accounts, they leave them, they become dormant. Maybe they gave them access to their Google Drive or something and they forgot about it, right? And they forgot to put security on it and nobody even knows about it. Those kinds of things. But that's been happening. That's traditional stuff that's been going on. And that needs to be fixed too. I think, the bigger identity sprawl is, the new era of AI agents that we're in now. I think there are so many new tools out there. And, I'm personally experimenting with so many different tools. I can only imagine that others are doing the same. It depends on the policies they have set internally, of course, with their companies, whether they allow them to do that or not. But a lot of times I'm assuming the policies aren't even written yet. So it's kind of a free-for-all. It's a greenfield. It's all new. So people are probably experimenting with all types of different agents. They're not thinking about the security around them. There's no policies in place. There are no standards in place that they're using and adopting to manage the identities around these AI identities. And they can be extremely powerful and valuable. I can understand why companies are moving to use them. They are saving tons of time, tons of money, and getting stuff done really, really fast if you build them correctly. So with that, of course, not going to be surprising that the oversight they're going to have, just like they have been in the past traditionally, is identity and security usually goes last. For whatever reason, get the thing done goes first, and then you think about the consequences later. So I can only imagine, and I've already kind of seen this, that identity sprawl is happening in this area because they're trying to get stuff done fast and they're forgetting, oh yeah, that's right, I got to make sure that this agent is secure, that it's not going off and doing things that I don't want it to, and that other people don't have access to this agent to let it do things that we don't want it to do. The guardrails are not in place yet because it's so new. So I get it, we understand it, but I think we need to be proactive, probably way more proactive here than we do even with humans, because the damage that a misconfigured AI agent can have is probably far greater than just the average person making a mistake. Now, of course, if a human identity gets compromised, then the attacker is going to get in there and do things. I'm not just talking about those kinds of mistakes. I'm talking about like data loss, not just data compromise, but data loss, misconfiguring your systems, spinning up other things that you didn't even know existed. It can become like this almost like an infinite spiral loop of identities that can just get out of hand. And to clean up that mess would just become really, really, really cumbersome.